Adult humans want to change. We want to grow and thrive, push our limits. We want to experience it all. We're super curious and want to play with everything. Oh wait, I got that wrong. That doesn't describe adults, that's children. Kids are amazing role models because they don't care like adults care. They want to play. They aren't afraid of failing. In fact, they're obsessed with pushing through failure to master skills. Regretfully, all of that tenacity and spunk is obliterated by adulthood. Not because adults don't remain curious or hungry for experiences. Adults are afraid. Afraid of what they know, of not doing it right, being let down, letting others down, their reputation. We know enough to know we don't want to fail. Fear is the mind killer, says Frank Herbert, and as the dunes of the legal landscape shift towards the future, fear is doing a number on the minds of legal professionals. There are a million books on how to run a firm, raise a child, how to diet, how to make $1 million, and yet there are countless examples of failing law firms, bad parenting, unhealthy eating habits, and well, you probably aren't surrounded by millionaires when you go to your local donut shop. Point is, all the answers to becoming a better whatever lie not in the countless books or inspirations or airtight strategies waiting to reveal themselves to our adult brains, but the inspiration and fearlessness you can recall that's laying dormant inside. Your sense of wonder, the determination of play, the kid that keeps trying. The future needs fun, it needs grit, it needs fearless lawyers to solve its legal problems. So, are you game? Well then let's play.
Lawsome, the podcast for law firms. Powered by Consultwebs.
Welcome back to Lawsome, the only podcast for law firms that wears a sweater with a plastic-lined pouch to Thanksgiving dinner. We can take what we need for leftovers right from the table and store it in our kangaroo food sweater. We're here to inform, educate, and entertain the legal community on the latest in personal and professional developments. I am Jake Sanders, and I'm joined by Paul Julius. Paul, what's the debate with the stuffing inside the turkey versus outside the turkey? Where do you stand on that?
This has sparked many a lively debate in my childhood.
True.
With the more germ-adverse people saying never put anything inside a turkey. I don't know, man. To me, I mean, what's a holiday without a little salmonella? I mean, come on.
If holidays are all about rolling the dice, for me,
right?
Taking chances.
I mean, throw some oysters in there too. I mean, why not? Right?
Tell everybody, Paul, tell them what's on the show.
On the show, we talk about fear and entrepreneurs as we review an article from the Harvard Business Review. Then we interview legal tech gadfly Dan Lear from Right Brain Law about embracing change, the future of legal tech, and the different categories of hot sauces. And as always, we drop the hammer on our guest with 5 questions we ask everyone.
Pull up a plate. It's the Hot Takes Buffet.
Today's link is from the Harvard Business Review. It's by James Hayton and Gabriella Cacciati. It's entitled How Fear Helps and Hurts Entrepreneurs. Paul, do you want to read this intro and then provide your hot take about this article?
Certainly. So here's the summary. While fail fast and often is the constant refrain of the lean startup movement and many others, no one really wants to fail. Failure has many ramifications that would be foolish to overlook or downplay, including potential bankruptcy, repossession of workers' homes.
Jeez, this is getting hard, bro.
If you weren't scared before, social stigma, and people losing their livelihoods.
Dang, okay.
Most existing research has thus focused on failure as an inhibitor of entrepreneurship. Their research shows a more nuanced picture. Fear can inhibit and motivate. Rather than simply stopping people from being entrepreneurial, fear of failure can also motivate greater striving for success.
Interesting. Oh my God. That got pretty crazy there in the middle. There's like you in a van down by the river at the end of this
Either
one.
This works or you will be naked in the woods eating grubs, cast out of society.
And you can't even cook the grubs. You want to
That's
cook
right.
them on something.
No,
You didn't even
you're
bring a
not
pan or
allowed
anything.
fire. Technology has abandoned you as well. That's it, dude.
Well, so what was your take on this?
It's a good article, and I think it's real. There's a lot that can happen. I don't know the everybody says, it's your third business that succeeds, right? You're going to have a couple failures first.
Yeah. So if you're running a law firm, is it your third law firm that you're starting?
Don't start. Yeah. Make sure that the name that really, rings, you save that one for your third firm. So it's got some tips on how to work and how to ensure that failure works out positively.
Right.
I found this strange. And I've been in a situation where we had founded our own company. And you get so far out in front of these things that that the real fear, like this breaks it down into, emotions and problem solving and all this stuff. But the thing is, you've blown past, first you fought through you don't have enough. You can't start your own business. Nobody starts. This is a terrible time to start your own business. Where are you going to get the money? Who's going to buy that? All these things you've already blasted past that. And the fear that develops is the unknown. That's what happens and even when you're successful, you still don't know exactly because you're in uncharted waters, and there's sea monsters and pirates and whatever but you've got no one there to say, hey man, that's okay. Here's how you handle this. Well, you don't know how to handle that because you made this up. And I think that's what the real fear is. And that's what you have to just get comfortable is a certain amount of, I wouldn't say instability, because I don't think anybody should really be that, freelancers, I guess there's a certain amount of instability that you can be comfortable with. I think you have to be very willing to embrace thinking on your feet and creatively solving problems.
And that's a wonderful point, Paul. And I definitely agree with it. My intro talks about how kids naturally, my daughter, she's 2.5, and she's at the point when I try to help her put on her shoes, she gets mad at me because she wants to do it and she's struggling to do it. And I'm trying to hurry up and get going. But she's mad at me because I'm, trying to rush her, but she needs to master the skill. She wants to struggle. And I think most people don't want to struggle, but kids lean towards it. But there's a reason for it. They're learning a skill. And so I think there's something about entrepreneurship that gets lost because it's not purposeful enough. And so lawyers are wondering, how am I going to translate this stuff? You want me to be lean and get entrepreneur and start doing all these things, but how does that work at the law firm with these very cemented codes that we need to engage with? And there is no precedence where we're headed. And I love that your hot take on this article and the reason why it's important is that where law firms are headed, where the legal landscape is headed, not because law firms are headed there, but because legal consumers are headed there.
Yeah.
That
absolutely.
That's the point.
Yeah.
It's not that you have to change because you're a bad lawyer or a dumb lawyer or some Luddite lawyer. And there's a lot of lawyer shaming and Dan talks about it later and he makes it okay, to be okay with this amorphous kind of gossamer in between world where we're trying to figure out what legal consumers need and how lawyers can participate. And Dan, who's a lawyer, also a technologist, is at the crossroads of those two places.
Mm-hmm.
I think people are just afraid. And I think if you know too much, then that even shuts you down even more.
I think, too, for lawyers, it's a little weird and can probably be a little bit more jarring because here's something where for years, decades,
yeah,
people followed in their father's footsteps who followed in their grandfather's footsteps.
Right.
You go to, whatever,
Wherever. Yale, Harvard.
whatever school that your dad
Got
went to.
mustaches.
Yeah, sure, exactly. And then you're going to graduate. You're going to be a junior, an associate, then a junior partner, and then you take over. Like that path is starting to crumble.
And it's weird because you didn't mention what the client needs from you. It's
No.
just that the lawyer does this and becomes this.
Yes,
and
exactly.
becomes this, like it's some weird tree or some odd thing. But that's the future, is this client that's wondering, well, where am I at inside of your old dusty mustaches?
And what do I need you? What do I need you and your dad's dad for? That I can't get off Rocket?
Because I got Google over here. I'm legal zooming myself. And it starts there, but it's going to change. And Dan makes a compelling case that software companies are going to be solving those legal consumer problems with or without lawyers, which should scare the pants off of the lawyers. They're like, wait a minute.
Well, but that's where the entrepreneur thing comes in and saying, look, we're not sure how this is going to work, but people are going to, there's going to be different ways
stuff
that we handle this. There's going to be, and I think an important thing here too is that it's not, we've had lots of guests on the show who are, kind of working behind the curtain, where it's not client facing services.
Sure.
It's more saying, well, we're going to change the way that we run our practice so that we can meet these needs, instead of saying, well, we're, like you just said, we're going to, slam this square peg through the round hole because that's all we got. It's not going to work that way anymore. People are, virtual offices are becoming a thing. E-document review. I mean, there's so many things. Absolutely. That you don't need that standard. If the dad's practice doesn't start looking at how consumers behave and start adapting their technologies to start running parallel to the technologies and the demands that the legal consumers have,
then the law firm that they hand to their daughter is going to be, ill-suited. Things are changing, kids. What got us here isn't going to get you there. And it's not because lawyers are dysfunctional or bar associations are stodgy. It's really everybody wants the best. We just have to follow where the clients are. And it's a little weird and it's a little unsure. And we got to bring that with us.
Yeah. And I think it's important to say it's not the lawyer's fault. Like, we're not saying that, you're stuck with your, ostriches with your, heads in the sand or whatever.
I hope you like your leather briefcase or your ostrich jacket in the sand.
Exactly. We're not saying that at all. What we're saying is that there's an entire generation of people coming up who've never known anything other than getting information off their cell phones.
And the customer service experience from Zappos and the customer experience at Amazon. And can't I just grab this thing and swipe it?
Yeah. I don't need to hire a firm. I just need this affidavit for my housing, closing or whatever.
Plus, too long didn't read. I mean, no one has times for your terms and conditions, and people are living and dying by these words. But that's where the danger comes in. And that's that there's a moral obligation for lawyers to come in and make sure we do it right. And that's an important distinction. And I think Dan is a lawyer and a technologist who's trying to make it happen.
Absolutely. And Dan's comfortable going into those places, where he's walking the tightrope without a net, or even jumping off and just hoping that he's gonna land somewhere, because he always does. Because a lot of it's about your attitude, and I think that's a lot of what he's talking about. The right brain side is that sometimes you have to do things that the logical side of you is screaming, but the creative side of you is saying no. You gotta. This is called intuition, and you gotta trust it sometimes.
Stay tuned for more goodness from Lawsome after this message.
Since 1999, Consultwebs has been helping law firms connect with clients on the web, connect digital marketing success with firm success, and connect their business goals to proven strategies that help them get the most out of their legal marketing. Go to Consultwebs.com to learn more.
And now, for a Lawsome interview.
Dan Lear is a lawyer and legal industry gadfly and the chief instigator of Right Brain Law. As a practicing attorney, he's advised technology companies from startups to the Fortune 100. Since his transition from tech lawyer to legal technologist, Dan's been mentioned, featured, or published widely in the legal industry press and spoken at South by Southwest, Ignite Seattle, Georgetown University, Stanford University, reInvent Law, and the National Conference of Bar Presidents. Most recently, Dan was the director of industry relations at Avvo, and now it all goes uphill with his appearance on the Lawsome podcast. Dan, welcome aboard.
What's up, fellas? It's great to be here. I'm excited to talk to you guys and lay down some serious legal marketing and industry wisdom to all 6 of our listeners.
I know, and yeah, our mom.
We're up to 6 now. All right,
which is a shock. But we got the bots listening too, so we got the tech involved.
Of course.
So let's do a little bit. I gave that bio, but explain briefly to the audience your trajectory from lawyer to Avvo to Right Brain Law, and what's the goal of your work nowadays?
Totally. Briefly may be difficult, just for anyone who knows me, but I will try to successfully do that. So I guess sort of the pieces look roughly like this. Going into law school, I sort of always knew that I didn't want to be like just a regular lawyer, and that's no disrespect to those folks. I was really interested in the legal system. I think it's a really powerful tool in our society. But I knew that for me, sort of the traditional route was not going to be the way I wanted to go. And kind of a variety of things happened when I was in law school. The first off was I ultimately decided to do a joint degree program in law and business to sort of help me look at the legal system a little bit differently. And then just totally by coincidence, I got recruited to work in the legal department as a paralegal at Microsoft. And that was sort of my introduction to this world of technology, which was something that really before I hadn't had a lot of interest in or really didn't have on my radar. And kind of fast forward through law school, and I graduated. I worked for a couple of small firms, even though I knew I didn't want to be a regular lawyer. I sort of ended up working for a couple of small firms who were doing
on the
work
treadmill.
Yeah, that's right. And to be fair, I graduated in 2008, like right into the gaping mouth of the Great Recession. And so to be honest, like I was happy to find any work.
Sure.
I felt, there were people graduating from like top law schools who were getting their offers rescinded and put off and stuff like that. So I was frankly just kind of glad to be working. But kind of through that whole period, I was working on these really cool technologies and working with these really cool sort of, business practices and just seeing the way people were thinking about really building the future. And then I'd come back to my office and like it was like going back in time as far as the tools that I was using and the ways that we were thinking about solving legal problems. Mm-hmm. And so I just sort of started tossing ideas out there. And again, much longer conversation, which I'm happy to have. But like for a long time, I was super nervous about sharing some of these ideas. And I thought about having a blog forever. And then I thought about joining Twitter. And it took me a really long time. But eventually I just sort of started tossing my ideas out there. And one thing led to another, and I just began to sort of build a bit of a reputation. I started a meetup group around legal tech here. I got connected with a bunch of folks nationwide who were doing that. And at one point, finally, I was like, listen, I never really wanted to do this practicing thing. Is there a way I can do this legal tech thing? And I was lucky enough to have Avvo here in Seattle. And I initially came to them and said, hey, like I'm starting to build up a reputation, like for whatever reason, people are listening to me.
Oh,
and
God.
I think that might be valuable. Yeah, exactly. But they're listening. So like, who am I? So I said, I think that might be valuable to you. And they actually turned around and said, why don't we just hire you? And I was like, why didn't I think of that? So I left my practice at that point, and worked for Avvo for 4 years, and they were awesome. They were a small enough company at the time that they just gave me a super kind of amorphous job role, which was like kind of backfill for our CEO for speaking engagements and writing opportunities that he can't do, work with our general counsel on legal industry regulatory stuff, and then otherwise just be sort of an advocate and evangelist for Avo, in specific, and legal technology in general. And like, we'll just sort of point you at the legal industry and you just go. And that was awesome. It was, I can't thank those folks enough for being just so open-minded and kind of taking a guy who had a lot of energy and a lot of passion and just like sort of turning him loose. But as all good things do, it had to come to an end. And part of that was Avo was growing up. And so like the room for someone with a totally amorphous job title was sort of getting smaller and smaller. We were acquired. And so that was, that changed the trajectory of the company. But honestly, the other thing, even before any of that had happened, I just began to realize, like, as grateful as I was for them for having given me this great opportunity, I was sort of getting passion and energy around kind of pushing the things that I was working on forward on a bigger platform. I wanted to take a lot of what I learned from Avo and help other companies who were in this space. Or, I wanted to have more conversations with folks like you about, the interesting and amazing changes that are happening in the legal sector. And so kind of one thing led to another, and it just made sense for me to jump. I can't remember whether you said this before we got on or after. Did you want me to talk briefly about my trajectory today, or we want to get into that?
Oh yeah, man. Like, it's beautiful. And I think that really gives us a strong foundation. Right brain law as it is, what is it? Because I'm looking at it and I'm like, it's cool. And you're writing this thing, but it comes from real experience. You're actually a lawyer. You have been through the kind of struggles from both sides, client and then, services. So right brain law is the generation and output of all of this stuff. And what is that kind of central purpose to it?
Like, are you guys hiring? I don't know. Like, what do you want it to be?
Well, we just want to make sense before we start unpacking all of the stuff,
No, totally. So I'm still to be like totally transparent. I'm still figuring that out. And again, try to keeping this brief. When I left Avo, so I sort of ascribed, or I've gotten to be a big fan. And actually, Mike Whalen is a good friend of mine who I know is on your podcast.
Friend of the pod, yes.
Friend of the pod. Yeah, he pointed me in the direction of a guy that he chatted about on your podcast, a guy by the name of Brian Clark.
Yeah.
Who kind of ascribes to this notion of audience-based kind of business building. So you get a bunch of people who know, like, and trust you, and then you figure out what it is that you can sell them, or what it is that you can offer, what problem you can help them solve. And so, as I was thinking about leaving Avo, I thought, I have a decent following on social media. I've been talking for 4 years to lawyers, and the people that I thought were listening to me, like I sort of logically assumed, were other lawyers. And so I was thinking, like, okay, what I think I'm going to do is try to build a business helping these lawyers with whatever it is that they might need. And I sort of set off trying to figure out what that was. Simultaneously, I had a number of other legal tech companies who had come to me and said, hey, we'd really love to tap into your expertise as well. You obviously know this sector, right? You've done this thing at Avo. And so I was like, okay, great. Well, I'll build sort of this business selling stuff to lawyers. Not clear what that was. I was initially sort of interested in professional development and sort of still remain. And then on the side, I'll do this consulting with the legal tech companies to sort of keep the lights on. And what I've really learned, at least over the last 4 years or 4 months, the last day at Avo was June 1. Was that actually the people who are following me are the legal tech companies. And so I'm sort of in this process of thinking, okay, well, if those are the folks who are most readily paying attention to me and are most readily interested in working with me, I need to figure out how to serve them better. And so that's kind of how it's evolved. The website just generally needs an overhaul, but I've just been so dang busy, like trying to find new clients and figuring out how to help the ones I have, and really just trying to orient myself that I haven't had a chance to update that. But if I were to sort of very briefly summarize like who I am and where I think I'm going, or what I think I'm doing is I I can't think about how to do it brief. I just think there's so much opportunity at the intersection of innovation and technology and the legal sector. And I'm not sure that anyone is maybe bringing that kind of startup entrepreneurial approach. Like I get so excited working with so many of these companies who have such interesting ideas and such big aspirations. And I think there's just so much potential to improve the legal sector from, everything from practice management, how lawyers work, all the way on through to how we serve the customer, how we improve access, how we help more people. That I just love working with those types of people and thinking about those kinds of ideas and pushing that movement, quote unquote, forward. And so that's kind of where I've landed. And now I just have to figure out how to get paid doing that.
Nice. It's interesting. I was reading an article you wrote back for Avo last year, and it was kind of your write up on Legal Week in New York City. Yeah. Good article, but there's one thing that kind of stuck out, and you were talking about, and I just thought of it when you were talking about going back to your law firm after being involved with all these other companies during the day, and then stepping back through time to have to use typewriters and fax machines and stuff. But you said something in here that's interesting, and it was talking about fee sharing and prohibitions on it that keeps non-lawyers from getting into the legal sector, and so it kind of creates an incentive for there's no economic incentive for non-lawyers to contribute to legal, because it's kind of keeping these things out. So I was just curious. You wrote this over a year ago, actually, but have you seen some change? Because we've had some guests, you mentioned Mike Whalen and stuff like that. Have you seen some things maybe change there a bit, where maybe there's some tech that's getting a little more accessible? Like, do you think, what do you think lawyers are using or getting excited about, or what are they maybe missing? That's happened, or have you seen any change since you wrote that?
So I'll make a quick sort of caveat as far as I think what I was talking about in that article, and I pulled it up and was taking a quick look at it. I don't know that I'm seeing, there has been no fundamental change in the rules that prohibit outside investment in legal. So let's put a pin in that point for a moment and
okay.
talk about the broader landscape.
Okay.
That being said, and Avo was really at the forefront of really challenging the industry to rethink the way they thought about a lot of these rules. And I thought, I was involved in a lot of discussions with regulators and sort of other folks. We mentioned the National Conference of Bar Presidents, which is a group I've had a number of discussions with over the years. One thing I would say is the conversations that I was having at Avo now maybe 3-4 years ago about kind of some of the things that Avo was doing with Avo Legal Services and trying to sell flat fee legal services directly to consumers, which was problematic from a lot of regulator standpoints. I do believe that the conversation is evolving. I do see an increased openness, both in sort of understanding how other entities can play in this space and help. And I see not across the country, but I see a number of different jurisdictions that are taking an increasing openness to allowing more nuanced or sophisticated or just willingness to open the doors a little bit to other providers kind of participating in the legal sector. There are a handful of startups that I'm talking to who are increasingly sort of moving in this direction. And I don't think that they're getting kind of the regulatory pushback that maybe Avo got a few years ago, or obviously LegalZoom got, a decade or so ago. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm generally seeing a more openness to it.
Sort of. And I didn't mean to get sidetracked with the restrictions and the barriers and stuff, but I just, we've had people come on and they're talking about, chat bots. They're talking about using Alexa to record their hours their billable hours and stuff like that. So, I mean, just like conversations like that, would that have happened a year ago, 2 years ago? I mean, do you see that there's more willingness to look at how technology can maybe help and enhance people practice law? Or is it still just like, well, I can't do a chatbot because the bar is just going to shoot that down?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. Here's what I think the fundamental challenge to all of that stuff is, which is lawyers are, I think, by self-selection and then by training, risk averse and generally really hesitant to try new things. They're late adopters. And I don't, a lot of people say this is, they sort of, they say things like that, and then they're sort of saying, and that's what's wrong with the legal profession. That's why we don't have technological adoption, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The analogies between doctors and lawyers are not perfect, but like the last thing you want to hear your heart surgeon say as he or she is putting you under is like, well, I've never done this before, but I like our chances of things working out, right? Like,
you got that entrepreneurial spirit as you go into my aorta.
We'll muddle through.
Right, exactly. Like, but if we figure it out, man, it'll be awesome, right? And so, like, there are lots of good reasons why lawyers, should understand. Like, I mean, that's our whole legal system is built on this notion of precedent and how you can know that a court is going to look at a given situation, is going to interpret a given piece of legislation or a law in a certain way because that's the way they've always done it. And that's really good. And like, there are really good reasons why our legal system is built that way. And so, it's funny, I was talking to a friend of mine who is a partner at a relatively large law firm here in Seattle. And he said, big law partners are the risk averse of the risk averse of the risk averse. First you went to law school, which is already like a pretty kind of, law is generally considered, at least until the last decade with the Great Recession, a pretty sort of risk averse way to build a career. And then you go to big law, which is also like a pretty safe place to go in legal. And then you stay in big law and become a big law partner. Like, they're just a risk averse population to begin with. And then you layer on this level of sort of backward looking precedent facing disciplines. And of course, it makes sense that they're hesitant to try new things. I think that there are a couple of challenges that are really facing the legal system right now. I think the first is that technology has just completely blown the doors off of the way we think about information. We now have consumers, and I think as lawyers sometimes forget that we're consumers too, but we have access to so much information now that even in the best case, there's so much information that people can get access to that they can make, whether right or wrong, they can make decisions about how they want to engage with the legal system in ways that we never would have imagined, 10, 20, 30 years ago. We don't really have a choice but to try to understand this landscape better. Second, there really are now all of these tools out there that can help us not only help lawyers have a better quality of life, but also serve people more effectively. And so, like, we need to continue to be cautious and thoughtful in the right areas, but I think we also need to be open-minded and entrepreneurial and innovative in other areas like marketing, right, for example, so that we can take advantage of all of these new tools, because the risk here is that because now consumers have so much access to technology and information is increasingly, and there's all of the, there's this whole new entrepreneurial spirit about people out there, like really smart people just looking for problems to solve. And at some point, like, they will be able to solve problems that lawyers previously solved, or that lawyers were required to solve, or that lawyers were really good at stepping in and solving because no one was there. They're going to step in and solve those problems, and lawyers will be cut out of the mix. And you add to that, on top of all of that, there's this huge, gap in access, which I think, frankly, damages lawyers' credibility in this whole equation, right? Like, if it's our job to help people access the legal system, and we're constantly just sort of saying, like, we can't afford, or we don't know how to solve that problem, or like, then people will increasingly just turn away and find other ways to solve those problems. So I totally understand that's a super long way of saying, like, there are very good reasons why we don't see lawyers adopting technology. But on the other hand, there's such opportunity and really, like, I think kind of an existential threat to our credibility as lawyers that if we don't start to figure some of that stuff out, we're going to miss out on huge opportunity and potentially sort of damage our long-term prospects.
When you're talking about the way lawyers think, is that where you got the idea of right brain law? Is that the name for that? Just a quick aside. What does that mean?
Totally. So, was inspired by a book written by a guy by the name of Dan Pink, who's written a bunch of other business books. And he, interestingly, is a lawyer by training. He went to law school, but then never practiced law. And he wrote a book actually now more than 10 years ago called A Whole New Mind. And in it, he said sort of the professionals of the future that will succeed, or even just the workers of the future that will succeed, are those who can integrate left brain and right brain thinking. He said sort of the 20th century was the century of the analytical mind, right? The process driven sort of calculating analytical mind. And he said the problem is now so much of that can either be outsourced or done by a computer. And so the question is, how can you take those skills and build on top of them right brain skills? And he gives all these examples like design, laughter. He has all these really interesting ideas that sort of need to a meaning that need to overlay these left brain skills. And so he wrote this whole book, and he gave tons of examples in medicine and in tons of all these other examples. But he gave, even he himself being a law grad, he gave so few examples in law. And I was just really inspired by the book. And I was like, hey, I want to bring sort of this thinking and this kind of approach to legal. And so that's where the name came from.
So we're talking about the next generation of lawyers, people, the Trump bump. More people have been going to law school and graduating. And there's a lot of people on the Twitterverse, in the legal community that are sighing because 40% of these folks that are graduating law schools don't end up finding legal work. They kind of have to piece it together and find what it is. So the future is going to require a little bit of scrappiness. So I'm thinking the next generation of lawyers that you'll be talking to, the lawyers coming up, they know about digital culture. They know a little bit about marketing and perception and social media. They seem like they can handle the entrepreneurial spirit. In your mind, the law firm of the future, what does it look like? I mean, do you think it's going to be more solos, $1 million solos? The firm power structures within a law firm changing, more inclusivity, diversity, along with the tech, the law has to change too. So I'm just kind of wondering if you could unpack what you think that next generation of lawyers is going to need. The right brain stuff is great, but anything more in specific to the things I mentioned?
Yeah, no, I think we're going to see loose affiliations of lawyers who use technology and process and sort of interesting organizational relationships to sort of deliver services more effectively. At least that's what I'd love to see. To me, it's really a question of what are the broader trends that you see in the world of work today, and how would those map onto legal? So you see more people who want flexibility in working from home or remotely. You see people whose lifestyles in that way are facilitated by technology. So, you can deliver legal services to people in Massachusetts and be living in Kansas or wherever, right? I mean, to a large degree. Again, I think smart lawyers building tools and technologies and processes that, handle intake or practice management or document automation or marketing almost completely automatically, or they'll hire a firm to handle a lot of that stuff, or they'll use a virtual assistant. And so I think the same types of trends that we see in the broader world of work as it relates to distributed organizations, and I mean both distributed as it relates to sort of the organizational chart, but also geographically. I think you see technology enabled, so like work from anywhere type of a thing. I think you see people tapping into resources that they normally couldn't, tapping into expertise that they normally couldn't tap into, across state lines or even across international boundaries. You can imagine a situation in which you've got the example I gave just a minute ago, like the lawyer who drafts a bunch of divorce documents based in Kansas working with a lawyer on the ground in Massachusetts, and maybe the one in Kansas like is totally happy to have no client contact whatsoever, and the one in Massachusetts only wants to talk to people all day long. So they partner, right? And the person on the ground, the boots on the ground in Massachusetts is doing all of the FaceTime and interacting with people and handling all the client contact, but then all the stuff they don't want to do gets outsourced to someone else who's more than happy to do that and never interact. And I think those are the types of relationships and the types of kind of firms and structures that we can build. That again, I think they will be better for lawyers. They will be better for clients. And theoretically, we'd be able to deliver those services at a much lower cost.
Mm-hmm. Man, so that's really ideal. And I'd love to see that kind of stuff spread out. But so how do we get from here to there? Like, if you have one piece of advice you could just pass on to lawyers right now who embrace that, what would it be?
Oh man, this is just basic career advice I would give to anyone, which is be super clear about what you want and like what you want out of life, what you want out of your career, what you want out of what it is that you're building, and then go do that thing and like do it to the very best of your ability. Because I don't know, I just fundamentally believe that if you go chase that thing that you do well and you want to do, if you want it badly enough, you will figure out ways to enable yourself to not do the things you don't want to do. Right. So like going back to our example, like if you just want to talk to people all day long and that is like truly what you want to do, then you'll figure out a way to get the other stuff done, the other stuff that must be done, so that you can spend your time doing that. I think we run into problems, and I think absolutely solo and small firm lawyers run into problems when they believe that they have to do everything and they have to be everything. And this gets back, I think, to what we said earlier, what one of you said earlier, which was like, oh, lawyers think they have all the answers, right? They frequently think, and they think they have to have all the answers.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And again, like there are times and places where that is true. But legal knowledge and legal expertise is a dramatically kind of narrow skill set. And so be comfortable knowing that when you're in your element, you can do those things, but also be like, seek out opportunities to not do the things that you don't want to do or not do the things that you don't do well, and sort of leverage that. Because again, like there's so few things that all of us in this life get to do like well, maybe one or two. And your competitive advantage, when everything else can be commoditized, your competitive advantage is you doing the thing that you do well more. So how can you do that thing well that you like to do more, and figure out how to do all the rest of that stuff using technology or outsourced resources or whatever. So that would be my advice. And plus, like, that's the thing that animates you, right? Mm-hmm. That's the thing that's going to get you out of bed in the morning. That's the thing that's going to encourage you to build something new and different and original that no one and that the world has never seen.
I love that, man. So how can people learn more about Right Brain Law and you, Dan Lear?
So the website is there, and that is where I blog. It's rightbrainlaw.co, and if it's the blog is rightbrainlaw.co, and just whack blog. As you mentioned earlier, I'm super active on Twitter, so at rightbrainlaw. Those are and like if people want to work with me, people want to talk to me, those are probably the best ways to track me down. I toss out my email address, dan@rightbrainlaw.co. Whoever's out there with rightbrainlaw.com, I have been watching you, and let me tell you, the minute you let that domain go, like I am all over that. But I have that CO, and I'm happy with that for now. So yeah, people can reach out to me, and I really love connecting with people. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well, so you can track me down there.
Awesome. Yeah, .com. Just, you've been warned.
Watch out.
That's right.
We're coming for you, bro.
Five questions we ask everyone.
Number one, what was the last book you read?
What was the last? What's the last one I've read? I'm going to say, oh crap, and now I can't even think of the name. I'm reading a Philip Roth novel right now, The Plot Against America.
Nice. Number 2, what's your favorite place?
Central Oregon, Bend to be specific.
Sweet. Number 3, what sites, blogs, newsletters, or podcasts do you regularly check in with?
Unemployable by Brian Clark podcast. I loved the IDEO Futures podcast, which now is no more. Bob Ambrogi's a solid legal read on law sites. That's about it for now.
Okay. Number 4, if you were stranded on a desert island and could only pick one condiment to take with you, what would it be?
Hot sauce.
Yeah.
Just straight. Well, I mean, are we talking Frank's? Are we talking Cholula, green Tabasco, red Tabasco?
Sriracha.
Well, I can't. That was.
Whatever they got.
Jake with the follow-up, man.
Well, no, I'm sorry. But there's a lot of different hot sauces in people's minds.
There really are. It would not be Louisiana style because that has too much vinegar.
Yes.
So I would skew probably in the either Mexican hot sauce direction, Tapatio,
Yes.
Cholula,
Yes, sir.
or in the Asian direction with sriracha or something like that.
Look
Nice.
at that. All right. We'll let you know before we send you off to the island, too. Be like, pick the sauce, man. You got to go.
Those two. Then it's getting ready.
Absolutely. All right. Number 5, we made it to the end. After a long day or long week at work, how do you relax and unwind?
I, by virtue of my life station, spend a ton of time on the side of soccer fields these days. I have 3 boys who play a ton of soccer, and I thoroughly enjoy it. And I guess I watch a lot. Again, Seattle-based, I watch a lot of the Seattle Sounders, which I enjoy as well.
For show notes, links, and info, go to thelawsomepodcast.com or follow us on Twitter or Facebook. Be sure to leave us a review and rating in iTunes or wherever you find the you listen to. Until next week, stay lawsome.